Legion, aka David Haller, is the son of Charles Xavier and Gabriel Haller. He first debuted back in 1985 in New Mutants number 25. He is an extremely powerful mutant. Legion has a whole host of abilities, too many to name almost. Chief amongst them, telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, reality warping, and so much more. The only thing, David's not really fully in control of his powers. And a mega level mutant, when his powers first manifested, it was during a terrorist situation, and he actually ended up absorbing the mind of the lead terrorist, Jamail Karami, which led to his mind splintering and him developing multiple personalities, each of whom controlled a different aspect of his powers. Legion started off as a villain of the X-Men, as he was quickly possessed by the Shadow King, as he was rendered catatonic shortly after his first true manifestation of power. David is also responsible for the Age of Apocalypse timeline, when he went back in time attempting to kill Magneto but killed his father instead, creating that horrifying branch of reality. Part of what made Legion so dangerous was his insanity and unpredictability as a result. However, over the years, David has metamorphosized into somewhat of a hero and has gained more control over his powers, partially through training and partially through tech. However, with a character like Legion, there's always the potential that his grip on his personalities could slip, and he could find himself a menace to the X-Men and the world once more. Also, watch Legion on FX, it's great. Number 9. Danger. Danger is the manifestation and personification of the Danger Room. Now, even if one is only casually acquainted with the X-Men, they most likely know of the Danger Room, the training space that pits the X-Men against all kinds of, well, dangerous obstacles to hone their skills. However, what they may not be aware of is this plot. Due to lots of backstory, Xavier found himself updating the Danger Room with Shi'ar tech. However, as he did, it posed him a question. Where am I? This led Charles to realize the room was sentient. However, he also needed a space for the X-Men to train, so he decided the best thing to do was cover it up and tell no one. The Danger Room was then utilized and destroyed when the mansion was attacked, the various times that's happened. And after one such time, Danger began to seize control of the other machines in an attempt to escape and forge a body. First, Danger coaxed a student to suicide, then managed to build a female body, take on and defeat the X-Men in her quest to kill her father, Xavier. Danger spent years seeking revenge, building new bodies or possessing others, like the Omega Sentinel. She was made all the more dangerous by her intimate knowledge of the team's weaknesses and fighting styles. However, ultimately this character became an ally to the X-Men. Sometimes you just gotta get over all that dark stuff Xavier does when writers want to introduce conflict into the story. That's how it goes. No matter how scary you are, turn good, you get bumped down the list. Number 8. Arcade. Arcade first appeared in Marvel Team-Up Volume 1, number 65 back in 1978. Now, Arcade has no powers, but you don't need them to be a scary or a credible threat. Arcade has a genius-level intellect and a penchant for murder that has led him down the path to be a hitman, but he doesn't just kill people. No, he makes them work their way through elaborate arenas of his own design, in his amusement park-inspired Murder World. Arcade never seems to have a hard time kidnapping people either. You're living your life one minute, next, boom, you're in Murder World. While Arcade has gone up against many Marvel heroes, he has had many notable encounters with the X-Men. When possible, he likes to get people in pairs to make more interesting, like Gambit and Wolverine. The rooms will be designed with a myriad of traps and dangers to test the specific occupant's skill set and mental fortitude. Now, some may be like, scary, but you may change your tune if you woke up kidnapped in Murder World. Number 7. David Moreau. David Moreau is yet another normal human, but is on here for the effect he has had on the X-Men verse. Moreau is also known by the name the G-Engineer. He first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 236 back in 1988, and was allied with the island of Genosha, a land whose prosperity had been built on the backs of mutant slavery, which had been made possible thanks to Moreau's invention of a mind control device. He also invented the mutate process, wherein 13-year-olds were tested for the X gene, and if it was found, they were turned into mutates, with their memories erased and rendered completely obedient. Now, Moreau can't get all the villain cred here. His mission was helped along by tech given to him by a villain who was in part 2, the Sugar Man. The Sugar Man had obtained a version of this tech from his reality, that being the Age of Apocalypse, and that version of Mr. Sinister. Still horrifying stuff, and a threat to not just the X-Men, but mutants everywhere. Number 6. Nimrod. Don't let the name fool you. Nimrod is a force to be reckoned with. First appearing in 1985 in Uncanny X-Men number 191. Nimrod comes from the now famous Days of Future Past storyline, a descendant of the robotic hunting machines means the Sentinels. His name is actually a biblical one that means mighty hunter. The fact that it translates to a playground insult years later, that's not his fault. Nimrod was created by the Sentinels to be the ultimate mutant hunting weapon, and he is nigh invulnerable. After some time travel, he decides that he doesn't need to eliminate all mutants, just the X-Men, powerful ones who are outlaws, who have an impact on the timeline. It's very Terminator-esque, and that's terrifying. That scene in the first Terminator where it's coming down the hall towards them dragging its foot and it seems slow, but then it pans out and you see how fast it's really moving, that still messes me up. The scene and the sound of it dragging its foot, just the... Number 5. Archangel. Warren Worthington III gets to be so high up because of just what an impact his villainous turn made on X-Men history, and it's a great storyline. Warren was one of the original X-Men, a founding member from all the way back in X-Men number 1 in 1963. Warren always had a complicated relationship with his mutation, the wings of an angel, or at least it seems that way now. At first he was a stereotypical air character, then he got broody when things got angsty in the 80s. Warren's descent towards villainy began with X-Factor, a group Warren was backing, which ends up getting viewed as mutant hunters for hire, and after he is exposed as the backer, his wings are mutilated and develop gangrene, leading to them needing to be amputated. Warren is devastated and commandeers a jet that has been sabotaged to blow up. He doesn't know that. Before it does, he is transported away by Apocalypse, who offers him a spot as a horseman. Apocalypse performs extensive genetic alterations that change Warren's appearance and give him metallic wings, and for a time, he was the horseman Death. Manipulated by Apocalypse, he turns harshly on his friends. As Archangel, he was a force to be reckoned with, and his path towards redemption and occasional slips back make for good reading. The design is great, those sharp metallic wings, and again, he's someone who knows the team's weaknesses. He is good currently, which, well, bleh. Give me back my Archangel. Number 4. Mastermind. We're talking about the first villain to have that name, who was instrumental in the Phoenix arc. This character first debuted in 1964 in X-Men number 4, and for our purposes we need Jason Wingard. Mastermind has the power to cast illusions, vivid and realistic ones, that he uses to manipulate people to his whims. He can also alter people's senses, how they feel, what they see, and most importantly how they perceive him. He likes to up his handsomeness game. What makes him so formidable is that he can even affect powerful telepaths, such as Xavier and most notably Jean Grey. This occurred during his association with the Hellfire Club. He at first uses his powers to pose as Nikos and initiate a romance with the help of Emma Frost. He is then able to convince Jean that it was Victorian times and they were married, and that she was the Black Queen. Mastermind doesn't make it, but his legacy lives on, as does his creepy mind manipulation plot. Scary, to be made to think you live in a bodice ripper. Mental manipulation is scary stuff. Number 3. Strife. Okay, so some explanations, but the Cliff Notes version. Strife is a clone of Cable, who first appeared in 1990 in New Mutants number 86. Strife was raised by Apocalypse in the future for the purposes of being a host body. However, Apocalypse decides against it once he realizes that Strife is a clone, as he thought he had the real Cable, but he was wrong. Strife's contribution to this list is the Legacy virus, which was first Legacy 1, then Legacy 2, but would eventually mutate into Legacy 3. The virus was set to target mutants when their X gene was activated, which would ultimately cause the body to stop being able to produce healthy cells and lead to death. But before the end, the victim's powers would go haywire, causing much damage to those around them. Strife took his time perfecting this virus, that's why there's multiple versions, except for 3, which was a mutated version that could infect everybody. Number 2. Cassandra Nova. This is a more recent character appearing in 2001 during the new X-Men number 21, as an antagonist to the X-Men and Charles Xavier specifically. So bear with me, because it's gonna get a little zany. Cassandra Nova is Charles Xavier's twin, sorta. But she was conceived without a body, and copied one from Charles in the womb. However, Charles sensed her terrifying thoughts, again in the womb, so he strangled her, and she was stillborn, but her essence survived. Eventually she was able to build an all-new body. She is Charles's opposite, a dark mirror. Her first act to announce herself to the X-Men was to kill 16 million mutants on Genosha in a mass mutant genocide. As a Mumadrai, Nova was meant to have to wrestle with Charles for control of his body, but thanks to his mutant abilities and hence hers, she could build her own. She has psychic powers compared to Charles, plus telekinesis, phasing ability, the ability to create psionic armor and block attacks, and a hate-on for the X-Men. It's just a lot. And number 1. You guys have been waiting for it. You're excited. It's Proteus. Proteus debuted in 1979 in Uncanny X-Men number 125. Proteus was meant to be one of the strongest mutants ever conceived. Born as Kevin McTaggart, he is the son of longtime X-Men ally Moira McTaggart. However, Kevin's powers are so intense they cause him to crave energy to replace what he has expended. In fact, he's actually made of pure energy. His mother had to keep him in containment to protect him and others, but he eventually escaped and put his powers to use, which includes body possession, so he can hop from host to a host. He also has psionic energy composition and reality warping abilities that he can actually control. Before he was known as Proteus, he was known simply as Mutant X. So because of the fact that he exists in a pure energy state, the bodies that he hops into, he uses them up pretty quickly, and Proteus normally just burns them out. He could leave before he kills them, but he just doesn't. He also has access to all their memories even after he's left, and has hopped into some of the X-Men's bodies. He's been known to melt buildings, reverse gravity, stretch people into liquid, and more. Basically whatever he can imagine, he can do. He eventually became able to possess multiple individuals at the same time and travel interdimensionally. He's even attempted to bring the astral plane into normal reality. His powers are out of control. The fact that they defeat him at all is a minor miracle each time. Proteus is terrifying in the scope of his power and the fact that really you can't get rid of him.
And at number 10, Barnacle. Barnacle was a character who first was introduced in 1999 in X-Men Magneto War Issue 1. He's a mutant terrorist who has one of the nastiest powers, moisture solidification. He can initiate a chemical reaction that turns moisture into a solid shell, which he uses for various things. It can contain a person in a constructive turtle-like shell with their own bodily fluids, ew. He can create indestructible armor for himself, and he can spray a stream of hardened barnacle crust through the air, also ew, because it most likely comes from the moisture in his own body. Super gross. He once tried to screw with Storm and her claustrophobia by encasing her in a hardened shell, but luckily Nightcrawler was there to intervene. Dude is just flat out nasty. And at number 9, Deadbolt. Deadbolt is another smaller villain to make our list, and aesthetically is a very different kind of scary in comparison to our last number. Deadbolt is a living skeleton, contained with an energy field, who could remove pieces of his bones to use as a weapon. His body would immediately regenerate if he did, meaning I guess he's got an arsenal of bone weapons for eternity. He was a member of the Dark Riders, an organization that worked for X-Men Big Bad Genesis. He was initially seemingly killed off by Wolverine, but later it was revealed that one of his fellow Dark Riders was the culprit behind his death. His skull is also split in half, creating devilish-like horns atop of his head. And he's definitely not the kind of villain I'd want to run into in the middle of the night, that's for damn sure. And at 8, Peeper. Peeper, aka Peter Quinn, is one of the weirder villains on our list. He was recruited by Magneto to be a member of the new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but was abandoned with his new teammates when failing their first mission together, and getting defeated by Captain America. From there, he and his band of rejects became the Mutant Force and worked for Mandrill, which also got them arrested. Then, after that, Red Skull became their new sponsor. Years later, he would die at the side of a road, being devoured by Predator X while screaming. So if anything, based on all of that, Peepers doesn't actually seem all that scary now, does he? But in terms of his appearance, those large, eerie eyeballs of his are super unsettling. They give him various optical powers, including telescopic vision, microscopic vision, X-ray vision, and optic blasts. I do not want to know what he uses the X-ray vision for. No. And at 7, Onslaught. First appearing in X-Men Volume 2, Issue 53 in 1996, Onslaught is a sentient psionic entity created from the consciousness of two of the most powerful mutants, Charles Xavier and Magneto. During a prior battle, Xavier would become catatonic when using his abilities to shut down Magneto's mind. He was prompted by Magneto ripping the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton. Yeah, I could imagine why that would piss him off. This caused the darkest parts of Magneto's mind to enter into Xavier's consciousness, merging with the hero's own darkest tendencies, everything that he had repressed for the last 30 years, which eventually grew into an individual persona, otherwise known as Onslaught. After he was defeated the first time, his consciousness lingered, and he would later return the Onslaught Reborn storyline, the brand new but equally scary form. And at 6, Zorn. Zorn is a bit of a confusing character thanks to a series of retcons surrounding him. He worked as a teacher for the Xavier School of Gifted Youngsters, but then it was revealed that he was actually Magneto all along. At this point in time, the metal manipulator was dead. But then it was retconned yet again, revealing that Zorn was just a Magneto imposter and not actually Magneto himself. Lisai. Anywho, the reason why he gets a spot on our list is thanks to his dandy little helmet. It's a skull-like helmet, which is scary on its own, but it's meant to contain massive amounts of energy coming off of Zorn's head. He has a star for a brain. I mean, man, like if I saw someone who had a star for a brain, no bueno, avoiding that dude. And at number 5, Dark Beast. Dark Beast is an evil alternate version of Hank McCoy from Earth 295, the Age of Apocalypse reality. Because of Charles Xavier's absence, this version of Hank disregarded all sense of ethics, becoming a mad scientist who worked under Apocalypse. He would conduct cruel and unusual experiments in Apocalypse's name, and even managed to escape that reality before it imploded, showing up on Earth 616 and becoming quite the threat to the X-Men and Hank, and the 616 Hank while he was present. He's 20 years older than the 616 Beast and therefore isn't as physically strong as his counterpart, but still gives him a run for his money. Plus he's villainous, so you know, putting all that brain power to evil uses is not a good thing. Moving on to number 4, Mojo. Mojo is one creepy fella. First appearing in Longshot issue 3 in 1985, Mojo is an absurdist parody of network executives. He's part of an alien race known as the Spineless Ones, and is the dictator and a slaver of a dimension he rules called the Mojoverse, where all of the dimension's inhabitants are obsessed and addicted with Mojo's gladiator television programs. When he was created by Ann Noceti and Art Adams, Noceti specifically requested that Adams make Mojo as disgusting and unpleasant as possible. He's got wires that hold open his eyelids, inspired by a Clockwork Orange. And because of his large size, he rides around on a multi-legged flying platform that's armed with a bunch of deadly weapons and particle beams. In addition to his mastery of manipulation and several of his powers being derived from magic, Mojo is also able to generate an anti-life force field that makes him capable of killing things simply by touching them. He can wither plants and age humans. In at 3, Apocalypse. Apocalypse is one of the X-Men's most fearsome foes. He's an ancient evil, the first mutant, who is practically immortal and sees himself as the father of mutant kind. He operates under very Darwinian principles, believing in the survival of the fittest, killing off the weak in order to make the survivors grow stronger, for the betterment of humanity. He considers himself the apocalypse of the modern man and the father of what humanity will become, mutant kind. He fully believes that what he is doing is the right thing. He's ensuring evolution. Minus how terrifying his ideologies are, his abilities are, intense too. The ones at his disposal are tremendous. He has self-molecular control, a genius-level intellect, he can manipulate matter and energy, he can shapeshift, is capable of accessing astral planes, is telekinetic, telepathic, is a technopath, he can augment the powers of other mutants, and transfer someone's consciousness into another being. In all of his appearances over the years, Apocalypse has always been one of the most physically intimidating villains in Marvel's comics, and considering what he's capable of, it's definitely not hard to find the character downright horrifying. And at number 2, Emplate. Emplate may not be as well known of a villain as our previous number, but he's arguably physically more frightening. Emplate is a mutant who physically looks like an emaciated corpse with purple artery-like veins running across his gray flesh. He is not a looker, that's for damn sure. Emplate first came to be in Generation X issue 1 back in 1994, and when his mutant powers first manifested, he was overcome with hunger and killed his mom because of it, causing his father to kick him out. Emplate, who back then was known as Marius St. Croix, sought out the dark arts out of a desire for more power. He would later be rejected by his sister as well, who he would magically trap inside of the form of a mute creature with razor-sharp diamond-hard skin, Penance. While he's only fought the X-Men a handful of times, his powers are not to be taken lightly. He has the ability to siphon mutant energy from bone marrow of mutants. If he siphons all of their energy, they die. While he's feeding from them, he cancels out their powers and often takes on some of his victims' attributes. If he feeds on them multiple times, he gains their powers permanently. So he's basically a mutant vampire. In addition to this, when he feeds, he achieves a measure of psychic control over his victims' minds, making them his subordinates. Scratch that, he is the mutant Dracula. And finally, in at number 1, the Shadow King. The Shadow King is one of Charles Xavier's consistent foes. He was a human mutant from Egypt with vast telepathic powers, which he used for evil, eventually taking on the alias of the Shadow King. Through retconning, he was made into an ancient evil entity. Aside from his bone-chilling appearance, this character scores the top spot on our list thanks to his possession abilities. While in the astral plane, he can possess other beings and control them. So he's basically like a monster out of a horror movie. He's an astral entity who preys on the bodies of highly skilled and powerful psychics, which he then uses to enslave others with. In the Shadow King's native form, he cannot be harmed physically, and he has lived for over a millennia. Generally, the Shadow King is depicted as a large creature with purplish skin, glowing red eyes, sharp claws, and even sharper teeth. Luckily, in order to exist in reality, the Shadow King needs a host, and if that host is killed, it will disperse the Shadow King's astral essence, which can take up to months or years for him to remanifest in his astral form again. Thank God. And at number 10, Holocaust. I mean, his name enough should have you wary. Holocaust first appeared in 1995's X-Men Alpha, and is one of the Horsemen of Apocalypse. Holocaust was initially from the Age of Apocalypse timeline, where he was known as Nemesis, where he was said to be one of Apocalypse's children. Magneto would strip Nemesis of his flesh in a battle, enraged for the deaths that Nemesis had caused. His body was then retrieved by Apocalypse, who gave him to Dark Beast, who managed to capture his spiritual essence and put it inside a near-indestructible crystalline exo-armor, a procedure in which Nemesis became Holocaust, or rather, Holocaust was born. This character is particularly terrifying for one specific reason: his abilities. He initially possessed the power to generate highly destructive bionuclear microwave energy blasts, which can be super destructive. And later on, when he became an energy being, he gained the ability to drain the life force from other beings in order to charge his own exoskeleton that acted as a suit of armor for him. He's pretty much physically invulnerable, or at least he was. The character was killed by Hyperion, who cracked open Holocaust's Cyclops' exoskeleton and then absorbed all of his bioenergy into himself by literally inhaling him. So that's a fun way to go. And at number 9, Krakoa. Krakoa is one of the X-Men's earliest villains, having appeared in Giant Size X-Men issue 1 in 1975. There's been 2 versions of Krakoa over the years, with the first being the villainous one. It appeared initially as a small island in the Pacific Ocean that was located near a nuclear bombing test site. The radiation from that test site mutated the island's ecosystem, which altered the island into a hive mind entity in 1945, something that Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos witnessed. They encountered much of the island's intelligence and established a peaceful treaty in exchange for keeping the island's existence a complete secret. Now flash forward to 1975. Krakoa decides it's hungry and it wants to feed on the life force of mutants, because I guess mutants are tastier than humans. It kills a young mutant team and later captures the original iteration of X-Men. This is what causes Professor Xavier to create the second wave of X-Men, the team that consists of Wolverine, Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Thunderbird, Sunfire, and Banshee, all to save the first iteration. Polaris eventually launches Krakoa into outer space, and later it becomes captured by the Stranger. Now this Krakoa is perhaps one of the most physically intimidating entities that the mutant team has ever fought. It is a literal monstrous island. The second version of it though, in case you're wondering, is much more benevolent, having been grown by a member of the Hellfire Club but wanting to redeem itself with the X-Men and become one of them. It ends up becoming a part of the school and even helps the X-Men financially by growing diamonds on a tree that it produces. Man, imagine having a friend who could grow diamonds on trees for you. It's the dream. And at number 8, Sauron. Don't be confused by its name. This is no Middle-earth Sauron. Luckily. Sauron of the Marvel Universe is quite different, despite being evil and having taken the name Sauron after the Lord of the Rings villain. Sauron is the alter ego of Carl Lycos, who has a Jekyll and Hyde relationship of sorts with this humanoid pterodactyl form of his. He's essentially an energy vampire who often lives within the prehistoric jungle known as the Savage Land. First appearing in this form in X-Men issue 60 back in 1969, Sauron was initially meant to be a giant bat-like creature, but back in those times, the comics code authority was still in effect, somewhat. And his creators, Roy Thomas and Neil Adams, inquired with the organization, who suggested that the character's vampiric traits would be in violation of the code. So instead of going with something that resembled a giant vampire bat, which was banned according to the code, they ended up opting out for a form that looked more like a pterodactyl. Anywho, what can Sauron do aside from look absolutely terrifying? Well, he's got all the superhuman fixings: strength, speed, stamina, durability, and intelligence. He flies, duh, has hypnotic eyes, fire breath, razor-sharp claws, and most importantly, he can absorb life forces and mutant powers, and can sense mutants too. In addition to this, he can gain the powers of other mutants. Once, while battling against the Avengers and the X-Men, he was shot in the head by the second Black Widow, but survived thanks to having absorbed Wolverine's healing factor. And at 7, the Wendigo. The Wendigo is most well known in Marvel Comics for being the first foe of Wolverine's, the enemy in which Wolverine and the Hulk take on together. Based on the Wendigo legend of the Algonquin people, it's a large beastly creature with superhuman strength, stamina, durability, and agility. It has enhanced speed, hardened and sharp talons, and a regenerative healing factor. It's found in the woods of northern Canada and is the result of a curse that takes place under very specific conditions, primarily when a human in the forests feed on human flesh. Any of you familiar with the recent video game title Until Dawn may be familiar with the legends, although the Wendigo Marvel Comics looks quite different than the video game's representation. Now, over the years, the Wendigo has taken on its fair share of mutants, including Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and the members of Alpha Flight. And the Wendigo isn't just one character either. Various different Wendigo have appeared over the years, all formerly humans who partook in cannibalism and have become these wretched creatures. And at 6, Predator X. Predator X first hit the panels of Marvel Comics back in 2007 in New X-Men issue 34. It is a grotesque beast, reptile-like, with superhuman strength and speed, sharp claws and teeth, toxic saliva, accelerated hearing, and its body is covered in non-toxic inorganic mercury. That latter bit means it is highly resistant to physical damage and can draw materials in the environment surrounding it to help reform itself. So why is it scary? If you aren't already kind of freaked out by it? Well, it can track mutants on their genetic signature and is pretty much tireless, meaning it can track its prey relentlessly until it succeeds, wearing down its target for as long as necessary. It can run at speeds of 199 kilometers an hour for a total of 19 hours straight before having to slow down. Luckily, its insides are not as durable as its outsides. Wolverine managed to kill it by tearing it apart from the inside out with his claws. But fun fact, it killed one of the villains that we mentioned on our part 1 list, Peeper, who it devoured on the side of a road. It's vicious to say the least. Predator X was created thanks to Stryker, who, prior to dying, requested that a living weapon be made in order to combat the coming of a mutant Antichrist, aka Hope Summers. Moving on to number 5, Sugar Man. Sugar Man is by no means a good X-Men villain, but he is definitely a terrifying one to take in. First debuting in the Age of Apocalypse timeline, Earth 295, in Generation X issue 2 in 1995, Sugar Man would manage to sneak his way out of that reality and onto Earth 616, when bombs are blowing the crap out of 295 as a last resort means to be rid of Apocalypse. Sugar Man, aside from being hideous and offensive to the eyes, is an expert biologist and geneticist. He has 4 arms, superhuman strength, razor-sharp teeth and claws, an indefinitely long bioelectric tongue, ew, an enhanced sense of smell, and has the ability to alter his body mass and size, which is actually how he sneaked his way over to 616, by hiding in Colossus's boot of all places. He's responsible for a handful of deaths on Earth 295, and when he arrives on 616, he ends up forcibly enslaving hundreds of mutants for the magistrates. The reason why he really ends up on this list? Just look at him. From scary looks to scary intentions, moving on to number 4, we have the Reavers. The Reavers are a team of criminal cyborgs who first debuted in Uncanny X-Men issue 229 back in May of 1988, created by Chris Claremont and Mark Silvestri. The Reavers, led by a man named Donald Pierce, are dedicated to the destruction of mutants, and specifically the destruction of Wolverine. Initially, they were a gang of looters who operated in Australia, but began to branch out when they used the mutant gateway to teleport across the globe in order to pull off more sophisticated robberies. The X-Men stopped them, with only a handful of the Reavers escaping that first encounter, later reassembling under Pierce, who takes the team into a more militarized direction, using them as an assassination squadron of sorts bent on taking vengeance on the X-Men. They've done some pretty messed up stuff over the years, including capturing Wolverine, torturing him, and crucifying him. They're an extremist team bent on eliminating mutant kind, humans who have become cyborgs as part of the cause, and they've even stirred up trouble in alternate timelines too. In Age of Apocalypse, they were a band of human traitors who served the titular villain, and in the Ultimate Marvel Universe, they are human gladiators who have undergone surgery to become cyborgs, all for the purpose of hunting down mutants on live television. That's messed up. I mean, imagine running into a team of extremists like that who embrace technology in order to wipe out a race. Yeah, they're scary because they're a foe of the X-Men who are a little bit more realistic antagonists compared to some of their other enemies. We also got to see the Reavers make a cinematic debut in Logan, and needless to say they're pretty darn scary in their live action adaptation as well. And at 3, the Purifiers. The Purifiers are one step up from the Reavers, and are unsettling for very similar reasons. They're a paramilitary and terrorist organization, also created by Chris Claremont, that debuted in Marvel graphic novel issue 5, X-Men God Loves, Man Kills. And they are led by none other than Reverend William Stryker, who is their founder. So their whole shtick is that they're Christian fundamentalists who believe that they are fighting a holy war against mutants. They see mutants as the children of the devil and therefore need to be exterminated. In their first appearance, they abducted Charles Xavier and several members of the X-Men team, killed mutant children, fought against Magneto, and almost executed Kitty Pryde. Luckily for her, one of Stryker's guards grew horrified with his actions and shot Stryker, resulting in Kitty getting away and Stryker being sent to prison. That wasn't the last of them though. Even after Stryker no longer led the group, other successors took over the leadership mantle, including his own son Jason Stryker. Later on, the Purifiers got their hands on Warren Worthington III's wings and used blood from them, extracted Apocalypse's techno-organic strain inside of them in order to graft it and then give to the Purifiers, giving them their own wings, a specific subgroup that would be called the Choir, whose whole MO was to, I quote, strike down Satan's spawn with God's own might. Archangel would later massacre all of the Choir minus 3 members. And at number 2, Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister is one of the most notorious X-Men villains. Sinister, aka Nathaniel Essex, first debuted as the employer of the assassin group the Marauders, mentioned in the Uncanny X-Men issue 212 in 1986, but first seen in the Uncanny X-Men issue 221, almost a whole year later. Not only is his aesthetic unsettling, but he's also capable of some really terrifying stuff. He's telepathic, telekinetic, has superhuman strength, durability, and longevity, can create concussive energy projections, and, potentially scariest of all, can manipulate his body on a molecular level. Born in 1859, he was obsessed with Darwin's theories and was considered an unorthodox biologist, conducting immoral experiments that would make him an outcast amongst his peers. He even dug up his dead firstborn child to experiment on it. After awakening Apocalypse, the villain would painfully transform him into an ageless being, with Essex taking on the name Sinister, which was the last thing that his wife called him on her deathbed. It's a wee bit masochistic, isn't it? And finally, in our number 1 spot, the Phoenix Force. One of the most terrifying foes that the X-Men have ever faced off against is the Phoenix Force, an entity that is an immortal and immutable manifestation of the universal force of life and passion, born of the void between states of being, the nexus of all psionic energy which does, has, and ever will exist within the Marvel multiverse. The Phoenix Force requires a host, and it manifested within Jean Grey, who, when and losing control of it became the Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix has a vast amount of abilities, is able to manipulate matter, energy, and life force, and has cosmic awareness, all of which makes Jean's Dark Phoenix incredibly powerful and threatening. In many cases, in alternate realities, Jean has completely wiped out the planet or consumed the universe when not stopped by the X-Men. And while much of the Phoenix saga has been retconned, along with Jean dying and coming back to life, and then dying and coming back to life again, the Phoenix Force has still proven to be rather deadly regardless. Over the years in the comics, the Phoenix Force has proven capable of taking on powerful foes like the Beyonder, absorbing stars for energy that creates supernovas capable of wiping out entire planets, and even flat out wiping out all of existence in What If issue 27 volume 1. I don't know about you guys, but to me that's scary as hell.